we gotta earn our keep here. How you doing, Flaxy? Nice to see you, dude.
I'm literally having the best morning and it's like just started. I woke up and this is like a very rare occasion. It doesn't happen to most, but when it happens, it's the best.
Yeah,
I opened up my emails.
yeah,
First email in bold, like all capital letters, salary
yeah.
review. So I'm like stressing. I start like panicking. Maybe I'm going to have to
Oh,
go in for like a review and stuff. Letter attached for salary increase. Like how that doesn't happen too often.
oh.
Yeah. I feel like a baller.
That is pretty
Let me
cool, though. I mean, I don't think that
let me
happens
go
to a
to
lot of
my
people.
inbox. Let me see if
Yeah.
that's there from my lovely boss.
Because usually I thought like you go in and you have a negotiation and you try like explain to them how you've done so well and things like that. This was
Yeah.
just given.
That's very nice, Flax.
Wow.
That is a great way to wake up. I
Yeah.
will admit that's terrific. That's pretty
How
much
long have you
That's
been there now?
I've been at my current company for 10 months now. But I think how it
Oh,
works in companies is they give you a salary review according to their financial year, not when you started.
hmm.
I don't know, all companies might be different.
they're all different. Some people pay their people in Bitcoin. No,
Sure.
Hey.
really. I mean, like it's amazing. So listen, what a way to start your day. As you said, couldn't be better.
Would you
Mm-hmm.
accept Bitcoin? Like if someone came to you and would rather pay you in Bitcoin?
I would. I mean, last week you would have been paid a lot more than this week, but I think it's all. I think it's neither here nor there. I mean, like either way, you take your chances, right? And
Mm,
just maybe you end up scoring on the upside. It could be very lucrative. I do think in the long
Yeah.
run, though, that Bitcoin is going to be a lot more valuable than it is now, and it's already not bad. So if you take this as like if you take like $50,000 a Bitcoin, I think that's a good place to start. You can only really do well from there, but you have to be one of those people who doesn't mind the risk. And I suppose if you have a life where you have responsibilities like children or you know a massive amount of expenditure or whatever, then it probably wouldn't work for you. But if you're willing to take a chance and you're kind of on your own and you can do whatever you like, I think it's a great way to do things. And you'd need
mm.
balls, you'd need serious balls to do it, but I think it could be cool.
I
I
saw the
can't
other
wait for the
day.
day when it has become the norm.
It
I
might
saw
well
the,
be the norm.
the
Yeah.
first Ferrari in South Africa was sold using Bitcoin like 2 days ago.
Oh, really? Sure.
Mm. And I see like Bitcoin ATMs in the shopping centers now.
It is amazing. I
Really?
was I was talking to yeah, there's one in Santon City. We actually spoke to the guy on the show, I think, who put it in. Um, I spoke to Fred. Do you remember Fred Rode, who did the Discovery series with us, and he runs Heavy
Mm-hmm.
Chef? And
Mm-hmm.
I saw Fred yesterday because we did an interview. He needed to have me on his. It's almost like an online university for entrepreneurs, and he was telling me about some of these guys who've done really well. These dudes who sold Yappy Chef the other day, and
Oh
they're all
yeah.
in a surf club together, and they're all terrible surfers, but they all surf
How
together.
did that happen? They're all
I don't
surfing
know.
together, but they're all terrible as a
They're terrible.
prerequisite just to not
Like
know how to surf.
he said, none of them know how to surf properly, but they're all these guys, and some of them have done really well, and they've made a huge amount of money. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, that's got to be a good place to be as well, whether you're young or old or wherever you are. And you've got to be realistic about these things. It's like, no one, but very, very, very few people end up making like millions in their 20s or 30s. And even in your 40s, you'd be ahead of your time. 50s and 60s is where most of the people make their huge money.
Mm.
And I know that that's frustrating because all my life I've thought, I don't want to be rich in my 60s because you kind of, you're starting to slow down in your 60s. Let's be realistic about it. And some of these guys are really young and they've kind of sold their businesses and they've decided they're going to cash out and live a really interesting life and do whatever it is that they want to do. And that's
Yeah.
spectacular. I mean, must be hugely rewarding to wake up in the morning and know that you don't have to earn more money, but you might want to. You know, when your motivation is, I'm going to do what I love, I'm going to do more of what I love, I'm going to do things that change the world, I'm going to do things because it inspires and motivates me, but not because I need to pay the bills. There's a huge
And you can
difference.
take bigger risks. I think
I won't-
like a really cool point is to get to where you have so much in investments that your salary is just coming from your investments and you don't have to work, and like that's
Yeah.
enough to get you through. I think that's like a dope place to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's that. I mean, that's the dream, right? I woke up this morning though, and it's definitely getting really dark really early. I mean, so we're almost at the end of April. Technically, May is winter, right? So yeah, it's now it's starting to become. I used to sit here during summer, and I'd sometimes have, a shirt and shorts on, and wouldn't even wear shoes most of the mornings. Now it's like it's getting chilly, so you have to put on longs, you have to put on shoes, otherwise you freeze. So
What's your guys' view on long sleeve shirts? I don't feel like people wear them like anymore. The
You mean
actual
like collared?
shirt being the long sleeve.
You mean
No,
like collared ones, or do you mean like
a
a t-shirt with long
normal,
sleeve?
normal round neck t-shirt with longer
Yeah.
sleeves.
I was
Do you
wearing
own
one.
any?
Yeah, I was wearing one yesterday for the TV show when we recorded it, and they're nice in winter, but I mean they're not. To me, they're not very smart, and they're not very. I don't know. I mean, I don't love them. I think if you're going to wear a long sleeve thing, let it be a collared shirt. Otherwise, wear a t-shirt.
They look like pajamas to me, and I've like yet to see a
Yeah.
fashionable version of a long sleeve
that-
t-shirt.
That's the downside. I think.
No.
Excuse me, make way. As a Star Award judge,
Oh yeah.
yes, I would say it's very important to dress it up, if you shall.
Yeah, I think like
That's all. I just needed to name drop.
I forgot that Sia was a Style Awards judge. That's quite something to put on your CV, Sia.
I forget too. Then it's hilarious. It's hilarious. It was actually last year, but it was months after it happened in 2019 that I got a call from security, and they said, we have a delivery for you. And I thought, I wasn't even expecting any delivery. It was this very gorgeous smart box, and I love a great handwritten note, and was a thank you letter. Thank you so much for being part of our judging process. I opened the box, and it's this gorgeous trophy. Where is it? There we
You
go.
have a trophy.
Let me go and get it.
Oh,
I know. So now that's the
Very
talking point here.
and you can tell people you were a Style Awards judge. So, that makes everybody nervous to like arrive in front of Sia looking anything but sharp.
I can't imagine like Sia saying something bad about someone's outfit. Like I just can't see that.
No, I think you can.
Look at this. It's a full on. Yeah, it's all. Now it needs a nice wipe down.
What's this at the bottom? Yeah. Glam
Palm, the sponsors. And I thought, okay, well, thanks for this. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but
nice job, yeah.
No, but I don't have it like sitting by the door or in my lounge because I think that's a lot. So I actually really don't know what to do with it.
Doesn't it place pressure on you on what to wear as a judge?
Yeah, he has to. He has to massively. I mean, it's like Anna Winter of Vogue magazine. She can never look. That's how.
That's what I kind of like about wearing all black. You can never go wrong, and then people just think, "Oh, he's very like classic." Meanwhile, I'm just lazy.
Flax, the last time we spoke to you, you told us about that dog and how you were going to give the dog its best life for however long it had left, and it was going on this tour and it was the beach and it was going on holidays and. How's all of that
had
gone?
its own Instagram.
Yeah, it had its own.
Guys, these dogs are living their best life. So 2 of my roommates moved out. They bought a Hilux and they're traveling. So far they've been to like the wilderness. They're currently in the Wild Coast, just living in like a remote little house next to the beach. The dogs are eating like crayfish all the time. They're going for runs. Their Instagram handle is adventure_dogs_Africa. And it's Mascara the husky and Dory the, I think, sausage dog.
Yeah.
and they're like 15 years old each dog, and they are literally loving life. Like every day they're going to the beach, they're going on boats. The other day, Shay Mascara was walking across the pier, and the pier sort of collapsed, and she fell into the water, and she had a bit of a freak out. But Shay,
But they're
and
both
then
still
Dory,
alive. They're both still
yeah,
alive. Yeah.
they are loving life.
Sounds like it. Those dogs live better than most people in South Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to punish them, but out of sheer amusement, I'd love to now see these dogs just have regular canned food or just those pellets and see how they survive with that. Because I mean, going from, gosh, whatever they're eating to that would be quite a downgrade now.
I mean, imagine like living your best part of your life at the end of your life only. Like I want to live the best part of my life now, not when I'm like fragile and stuff.
Yeah, that's just not on the cards and something I don't want to do. And I don't know why. Again, I'm obsessed with this Bernie Madoff saga.
Yeah,
And
please tell me
over the
what's going on
past
there. Because he died.
Shucks.
What? He died like 2 weeks ago.
No. He
Really?
died on Wednesday afternoon. So we heard about
Bernie
it
Madoff.
Wednesday evening. And I've now just been even more obsessed about finding out more about his wife, because the wife is the only surviving person in his immediate circle, and how she used to live like a multimillionaire / billionaire and now has nothing and is bumming off basically. Her daughter-in-law's family, like living in some shoddy little room and has no money. I'm thinking about that when you say, Michael, you don't want to just suffer for all of your years and just only celebrate towards the end. The inverse has happened with her, living the high life and now just has nothing. It is crazy to me.
Did he die?
Sorry, I just imagine going from being really, really rich and having everything you want and living this luxurious lifestyle where you every comfort is afforded to you and people just bow and scrape and it's terrific, and then you go from that to like having to have the spare room in your daughter's house. That's got to be really horrible. I almost think that that's worse than being poor from the beginning. Because if you're poor from the beginning and you never know what it's like to be really, really rich, then you don't know what you're missing. So it doesn't hurt you as much when it gets taken away. I think it must be horrible to live a great life and suddenly have it taken out under you. And this is all because her husband was a fucking thief. But that doesn't make it better.
Did he die in jail?
Died in jail, yeah.
At 80.
What was the cause?
Firstly, I'm surprised he made it this long. I'm surprised he wasn't shanked somewhere. Not that I wish ill on people,
I'm even
but
more
really,
surprised. I'm surprised he didn't kill himself after the whole thing, because his whole family turned on him, rightly so. All his friends who he'd ripped off, he stole billions and billions of dollars, and it was that big famous Ponzi scheme, to remind anybody who's still, confused.
Estimated to be about 65 billion that he stole from people.
And he took it from people he knew mostly, and it was like a network. It was word of mouth. So people were all, they were all saying, "Oh, Bernie's got this great thing. You should come in with Bernie." And there were famous people in there, and wealthy New Yorkers and hedge fund people, and they were all backing Bernie Madoff. And then
Elie Wiesel, the Holocaust survivor, was there. How do you steal from a Holocaust survivor?
You have to be a real piece of shit to steal from a Holocaust survivor. This guy did. And you know what? Bernie Madoff, good riddance. But at the same time, I feel sorry for Ruth. She didn't do any of this. And I don't think she knew anything about it. Otherwise, she'd also go to jail, So I think she was totally innocent. But I feel bad for her. Now she's, sharing the spare bathroom with probably two of her grandkids or whatever. It's not. It's still not bad. It's not terrible. But it's a hell of a way to come down from a billionaire lifestyle.
I'd kind of say it is bad, particularly because she is now living. So she had two sons, The one committed suicide, the other died of cancer. And so she's now living with her daughter-in-law, who Bernie also stole from.
I
Yo.
hate
And before this, she was living with her sister, who Bernie also stole from. So it's now having to go to these people, ask for help. And you're like, all right, and my husband screwed you over. But the way I've read about her, the way I've heard other people depict her as well, is that, she knew Bernie when she was 15 years old. And they've been these lifelong sweethearts, but she was a very typical stay-at-home wife. She knew a bit about the business, but didn't really get involved. She never worked, never really got much of an education. So she didn't know anything that was happening. So you can't really blame her for anything. And that's why it was a bit of a shock when all of this goes crumbling down. She doesn't have a career to fall back on. She didn't start a side business. She had to go and work for a charity and basically a soup kitchen just for some money at a time. That's tough.
So Jamie says, you still haven't told us what he died from.
I think it was just natural causes. Nothing.
A heart attack.
No story there.
I don't know how he got to that age. I mean, remember the story where his son committed suicide and was found hanging in his apartment, and next to him was a letter saying his dad made him do it. Bernie speaks about that in that telephone call that happened between him in prison and someone famous.
It says the letter wrote, Bernie, this is what happens when you F people over.
Yeah. I wouldn't be able to live with myself if my child did that. That's got to be top 5 most painful things that you can experience in your life. Is your own kid killing themselves and then blaming you directly. That's horrible. Anyway, I mean, that's the end of Bernie Madoff. But there's still all those people who he ripped off who are never going to get their money back. And I mean, some of them are also now living a lot worse than they were when they gave Bernie their money.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing that the son who died of cancer, before he died, didn't do interviews, wasn't really speaking. And he was asked once, because he did this college tour and he was just speaking to a very small class at college, why he didn't do more interviews, why he didn't defend himself. And he said, I am not the story to tell here, because I'm also not a character that people would forgive. I benefited from the wrong that my father did. I had houses, I had holidays, I had cars. But rather, there are thousands of people who lost everything. They put their life savings, they put their retirement, they put their, they've lost their houses because of this. If he started defending himself, rightly so, people wouldn't exactly, have that much sympathy for him.
I would struggle to have sympathy for this guy. I think this is also why I'm sometimes guilty of this myself. But I think we've got to, the material world is not the only thing that you need to focus on. And I think if you do and you become greedy, like Bernie did, I think you really miss out on the real meaning of life. And I think you end up becoming so obsessed with money that all the really valuable things like family and and relationships and friends and experiencing good things that disappears out of the window and all becomes like the balance sheet. It all becomes the bank balance at the end of the day, and that's no way to live. I mean, I know that we live in a society now, and we spoke about this briefly with Nina Hasty last time. In fact, it was this time last week, about how these people who live these great lives on social media, and they appear to have lots of money and they have great experiences and they always look beautiful in their pictures and they're on holiday all the time or whatever it is, but they're actually not coping, and maybe their finances are not coping, and for some of them that's just unbearable, and they do they go and kill themselves like Bernie's son, and that's, to me, that's a dumb reason to commit suicide because of finances. There are very few good reasons to commit suicide. And this is a controversial thing that people get into. And I don't know if we want to talk about this today, but to actually not be able to cope with not having money and making that the reason that you kill yourself, you really have missed the point of life, because there are very poor people who are extremely happy in this world. There are people who have nothing, who have way less than you, me, and everybody else that you know. And they still manage to have a good life. They manage to wake up in the morning, help other people, smile, laugh, find something meaningful to do. And obviously life is easier if you have money, but that's not a reason to quit. And you can always make money. You can always make money. Like, you could go out there and sell something. It only takes one good idea for someone to become very, very successful. It doesn't take 20 good ideas. You don't have to be the cleverest guy in the room. There's a dude running around somewhere in the world who invented those, those things that you use to close the bread packet, those little plastic things.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's some guy who invented that he's probably not smarter than any of us. He's probably about as smart as the average person, right? Maybe he's even a little bit dumber, who knows? But he discovered that and made these little plastic things, and he's probably got more money than everybody else who's listening to us right now. Even if we put all our money together, we might not have as much as him. And that was just one good idea. And that could happen to you. You don't quit life because of that. It's just amazing.
Someone once told me the easiest formula to becoming a millionaire, and it's like the most basic formula ever. All you have to do is find a problem that 1 million people face, and you charge each one of them R1 to solve it.
Correct.
So if you had a problem, Gareth, and I said I can solve it for just R1 and your problem will go away, would you not give me R1?
Sure, of course. I mean, that's what, and that's exactly why you can't begrudge someone who has done well, right? Because if you, for example, if you're jealous of Steve Jobs, of Shalom, when he was still alive, then Steve Jobs, all this equipment that we're using this morning in my house that we're doing the show on, my laptop and my phone and my iPad and all that stuff. If he hadn't come along, we wouldn't be able to do this. So you can't think that that money doesn't accrue to him, that he didn't deserve it. He's made our lives better. He's made everybody in the world that much more capable of living out their dreams and doing the things they want to do and being more productive. He deserves whatever he's got. He's solved the problem, which is exactly what Flax is saying. And if you can solve people's problems, even if it's closing the bread packet for them, that's an amazing thing to be able to say you've done.
Was that a Hebrew term you just used? What is it?
Yeah, I was also thrown off.
Ava Shalom. It means that person who used to be with us, they're now gone, dearly departed, kind of thing.
Oh,
so yeah.
What term in what language?
Where's it from?
That's Yiddish. It's Yiddish.
Are you sure you're not thinking Chas v'Shalom?
No, Ava Shalom. No.
Okay.
All right,
look, I'm not condoning suicide or anything like that by any means, but I would say I slightly disagree, Gareth, because I would get it. Let's just use as far removed as this is. Yeah, but let's just use Bill Gates or even one of Bill Gates' kids who we don't really, really know like that. Apart from just having the carpet removed from under you. So everything you've known the main house, you've known perhaps your father's New York City apartment, you've known your 2 summer homes, you've known the ski resort that you guys go to over winter. All of that, the material is gone. And then it's also your place in society, what you're used to, the responses you're used to when you walk into a restaurant and people, have those eyes and those whispers. And then it's also the friends that you can't really hang out with. It's debatable whether or not those were your real friends. I say I get it.
I say you can always start again. And they're the greatest stories in human history are the ones of people who've come back from nothing.
Yo. From 3 butlers to starting again.
Yeah, you know what? 3 butlers. Let me tell you something. Real character doesn't come from the good times. It doesn't come from luxury and comfort. Real character comes from the tough times. And you know that guy who goes, tough times never last. Only tough people last. I love that dude. I think of him often. And I think that's exactly right. You know, we've all been through a shitty year because it's now a year and 1 month, basically, since we went into lockdown. And you can either sit here and moan about how shitty it's been and how difficult it's been, and maybe you have every reason in the world to. I'm not going to say that, you know, I know better than you. But you can also look at the positives. And there are people, I know people who've managed to turn their whole business around like that. You know, they were doing events and now suddenly they're selling fruit and veg or whatever. And they're doing really well because they just decided, okay, that even though I've spent like 5 to 10 years building that business, it's finished now. I've got to start something new. You can't give up. You have to keep going. And so what? You lose your place in society. Who cares about that? I mean, really, you know, I know we all we all build it up in our heads that we are who our friends are, we are what we have, we are our reputations, and all of that has some value, obviously. But if you are suddenly, if they take everything away from you, you lose your job, you've got nothing else to live for. I reckon that's when you find out who you really are. That's when you can come back and you can have a story to tell. And if you do make it back, man, the people who you still have in your life at that point are the ones who are valuable. They're solid gold, because all the ones, easy to be someone's friend when things are going well. You know, they say to you, "Oh, let's go on holiday. I'll pay," or "Yeah, I'll buy the drinks this round." It's easy to be friends with people when they've got money. It's
I think
much when they're going
I
through
think
some shit.
it's important when you're growing up and when you're still in your foundation stages, like even when you're like 12 to like 29, 30, that you start instilling values of that there is value in things that don't cost money. So go on holidays such as camping, where you're just in a tent. It might be a bit uncomfortable. You're waking up to this amazing view. There's no cell signal, so that whenever something bad does happen or you incur financial loss, that you don't see these moments as not valuable and not worth living for. Because I mean, going on holiday, camping with your kids, and even though it might cost like 100 rand or 200 rand, like that is still an epic holiday.
Look,
just because it didn't cost millions.
I think that the saddest place to be is when you're pretending that your life is great, but you're actually in huge debt and you go to sleep every night worrying about it. You know, you could probably live a much more modest life and not have the debt, and you'd be much happier. Because it's so easy to get, you know, you borrow money these days. I mean, if you really want money, they can get a loan. People can up their bonds. There are lots of ways to kind of keep other people's money flowing into your account, but you're going to owe that money, and that's going to kill you. It's going to wear you down. We've spoken to, you know, I mean, the number of times we've had financial whiz people on here who give you good advice. You know, like Joe Camino, who he always has like the most sensible approach. He's like, he'd rather drive a shitty old car, but it's paid for, than drive some sports car that he owes the bank 3 million rand on. And when you were talking about that Ferrari and the guy who bought it with Bitcoin, that's different. Like if you're in that league and you can buy a car for cash or for Bitcoin, I mean, you don't care about money. Money's not an issue to you. But for the rest of us, I keep thinking back to that story that we had about SARS, where Judge Dennis Davis said they looked up the owner records of a whole bunch of Ferraris parked outside a fancy hotel in 2019. And they discovered that all of them were saying that they were only earning about 30 grand a month, which makes it impossible to buy a Ferrari. But maybe there were some of them who were actually like borrowing that money, or they'd got a loan, or they were going into huge debt in order to buy that car. That's terrible. That's like, who are you impressing? Do you think someone who likes your picture on Instagram is going to help you when times are bad? They don't even know who you are. They just see a picture and go like.
I've never understood.
I think we'll agree. I think we'll agree to disagree here, because it's similar to that the positioning of
we
the
have
Jackie
been
Chan story last week.
Yeah, we've been talking about this a lot, so let's move on. We've got some serious
Yeah,
stories
but
in the news this morning.
in conclusion, my life is not a Jennifer Lopez song. My love does cost a thing. I need money.
Jeez.
we don't play that game here. I'd rather
Till
cry while eating a
It will be
croissant.
a kept man. He'll marry some dude who's got like lots of money. You will.
Would
Hey,
you rather, Sia, marry someone that's ugly but rich, or very good looking, like 20 out of 10, but has no money?
Sorry to quote lyrics here, but Jay-Z also said in one of his songs, have you ever seen an ugly billionaire? I'm cute. See, as soon as give me some zeros, yo.
So
I see Channing Tatum.
He's answered your question. He would rather be with someone ugly but very rich.
Absolutely.
I just feel like society has a wrong idea of what wealth is. Wealth isn't measured by money; it's measured by your health, because health is something that you cannot buy.
Damn right.
Your wealth is your health.
If you are on your way out and you have, you have a, let's say you've got a bad heart, or you've got diabetes and you haven't been treated for a long time, and you've tried the best doctors in the world, or you've got some terrible cancer, for example. There's no money that can save you. That's when you realize, like, this money is just a way of it's just an estimation of some value, and really a very tight little narrow corridor of value. Anyway, we have talked about this for a while. Let's get into some headlines. First things first this morning, Life Estimeni, the National Prosecuting Authority. Yeah, they've announced a formal inquest hearing into the Life Estimeni tragedy, which will begin in July in the High Court in Pretoria. This is good news that the NPA have finally, after how long, decided to do this. It was 2016 that this happened. 2016. It's now 2021. And the
What
NPA
happened?
So Life Estimeni was when 144 mentally ill patients died after they were moved by government from Life Estimeni facilities to unregistered NGOs. And these were people who couldn't look after themselves. They couldn't often make decisions for themselves. So they were in the care of the state, or they were in the care of their family, or they were in the care of Life Estimeni. And the Gauteng provincial government decided they were going to move them into these NGO facilities that were unregistered. And these 144 people died because they were looked after very badly. They were treated very badly. Some of them died of starvation. Can you imagine that? And because they were mentally ill people, the government thought they could get away with this. And you remember there were ministers who went and appeared in front of Dikgang Moseneke at the commission and just would take no responsibility for this. So I'm very happy about this. You know how this story over how many years now has been driving me crazy because no one has been responsible. So they have finalized the date with a meeting with a judge, the NPA, and representatives of the affected families. And they hope that the inquest will lead to criminal prosecutions. Good news. The NPA's Lumka Mahanjana said it will start on the 19th of July of this year. It was determined in a meeting held earlier today. The NPA and different representatives from families and NGOs will be prosecuting the people responsible. Good. They must go. Aidani Mahlangu must go to jail. She was the health MEC for Gauteng at the time.
Surely an idea and a plan like this gets written down and people look at it and sign the plan, and those who sign the plan are held fully accountable.
Flex.
Or is that ideal solution?
I wish it was that simple, but politicians don't ever do that. They have meetings about meetings about meetings. I saw an interview last night on TV with Aaron Motsoaledi, who's the Home Affairs Minister, and it was Sally Burdett on ENCA, and she was saying to him, listen, what are you going to do about all these people crossing the border illegally? And his answer was so typical of a politician. His plan is to just have commissions and meetings about this. They'll all sit in a room and they'll talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. And of course, they'll draft plans if we're lucky. And then eventually those plans will be put into action in some half-assed, haphazard way, because these guys don't really look at solving problems, especially difficult problems. There's no reward for them. Government isn't built to reward the people who do things. It's built to reward the people who slack and just can coast through. We know this because we don't have competent people in government in this country. So I love your question. I just wish I could give it a positive and optimistic answer. I can't. In this case, however, we can rely on the courts to do what is required. And if the prosecuting authority is going to lay charges against the people responsible for Life Estemeni, that's a start. It's better than these families just being ignored, right? And the dead people being forgotten. This will continue. So the Reserve Bank has made a comment. There's this bizarre story about Tokyo Sexwale, who claims there's been donor fund theft. And this is so weird. I mean, Tokyo, I don't know if he's maybe going crazy or not, but the Reserve Bank and the National Treasury on Monday responded to claims by Tokyo Sexwale that billions of rands destined for the so-called Heritage Fund have been pilfered. During an interview on ENCA, Sexwale claimed that the existence of the Heritage Fund was now in jeopardy. He said, I am part of two people who are in charge of the Heritage Fund, belongs to a very powerful family out there in the world. This is what he said. This fund is here in South Africa already. It comes through the South African Reserve Bank. I'm one of the people who is a mandate holder for that fund. It is able to help the students with free education in this country. Jacob Zuma knew about the fund. Cyril Ramaphosa knew about the fund. Sexwale said the fund had offered billions of rands to assist with efforts to fight the impact of COVID, as well as the debt of university students. So he says, this is Tokyo, the fund is there, but it's in the process of making sure that it's brought into the economy. We found some resistance. When we checked the resistance, we found that part of the money's been stolen. This sounds very dangerous.
I'd believe him.
Why? Because it's so weird. Like if he's one of the two people who knew about this and who was in charge of it and was a mandate holder, then either he stole the money or the other person did, in which case he must name the other person.
So I think he's just trying to cover his arse over here. I think he's just discovered what's happening and he wants a full review instead of naming this other person, because this other person might be a bit richer than him. And then this other person's going to get his lawyers and come after him. So he's playing a good game here.
All right. Okay.
So I don't think story. I don't look, if money was stolen from this fund, it's not a far removed incident in South African politics, sadly. But I'm just trying to see the behind the scenes. You know, they say magicians are just all there with sleight of hand. I'm trying to look at what is happening around than just what he's trying to make us focus on. Why are you speaking all of a sudden? Who made you speak? Who did you consult with before speaking? I mean, what are you trying to achieve with speaking?
Tito Mboweni, the finance minister, put out this statement on Twitter. I mean, you know, this is what we're reduced to, is like having the Minister of Finance comment through social media. But he said, Tokyo Sexwale's statement about stolen money is untrue, sad, and it seems he was the victim of the many scams that abound. You cannot steal transmitted money from the central bank. How? His statement on television was unfortunate. I will reach out to him. So maybe someone has scammed Tokyo, you know. Maybe he's been like caught up in a scam. Someone was lying
so much so that you go onto television to speak about it and not just have an internal investigation.
Who knows?
You know, I had this moment while watching some of that interview and I thought, this is somewhat Trump-like. It was very like, you know, punching his chest very loud. And I thought, this is a little Trump-like. And then I thought, oh, wait a minute. He did host The Apprentice South Africa. So, hey, but what if we're seeing Trump 2.0 here?
In other news, the Home Affairs Department, we're talking about Aaron Motsoaledi just a minute ago, they have said they have resolved to either repatriate refugees or reintegrate them. This is mostly the refugees in Cape Town we're talking about. You know, those people who've been living on the streets and living in shelters. There are 41 foreigners who've already been deported 2 years after staging a protest against xenophobia outside the UN Refugee Agency in Cape Town and occupying a church off Green Market Square. Motsoaledi said the UN Human Rights Commission discussed two issues: resettlement with communities in and around Cape Town and voluntary repatriation back to the countries of origin. And of course, many of these people would prefer to stay in South Africa. 390 opted for reintegration. 121 accepted the offer of voluntary repatriation. So a third of them basically want to go back to the countries they came from, and the others, the majority, 2/3, want to reintegrate into the community. But of course, resettlement is not an option. They're not going to get free houses, and we're not going to just put them up somewhere. Because if you do that, then other refugees from all over the world are going to say, that South African government's so stupid. They'll give you a free house. You can live in beautiful Cape Town, and they will take care of you. And then they'll all come here. We can't afford that. We're not exactly a rich country. So let's see what happens. But Aaron Motsoaledi, and by the way, the government of Denmark doing a similar thing with Syrians at the moment. In case you don't know, government of Denmark have said to people in Denmark who came from Syria and claimed to be refugees, Syria is now not at war anymore. It seems to be settling down. It's time for you to go back. So there's lots
Why
of
doesn't our government come up with
why doesn't
our government come up with like a skills development program whereby we'll have the refugees and then they'll come up with a scheme whereby we'll give them free housing, food and that for like 2 years while they in a skills development program, and after the 2 years they have enough skills to then go and get the jobs that they want, the ideas or the money that they need, etc.
Because first of all, they are not voters, and therefore politicians aren't interested in them. Second of all, the people of this country, we already have 30-odd%, maybe even more by now. It's closer to 35 after COVID, 35% unemployment, which means South African people aren't being looked after. So if you start promising that to refugees and you can't even look after your own people, that's a recipe for disaster. As Linda says here, quite rightly, she's just echoed exactly my sentiments. She says we can't even do that for our own people. And the same comes from Corona's boring. But I do agree. I mean, like almost a conscription type thing would be ideal. Again, Flax, if we had the money, but we don't. Our government is bankrupt. We have no more money. Former Vice President Walter Mondale. Walter Mondale. He was vice president under Jimmy Carter's administration in 1976. Have you guys ever heard of Walter Mondale?
No.
I've heard of Jimmy Carter, but not of him.
Yeah.
I know Dwayne Carter, but that's Lil Wayne.
He's going to be like the least famous vice president in U.S. history, right? Anyway, Mondale was Jimmy Carter's running mate in 1976. He had he'd been considered the best vice president in our country's history by Carter, but not by anyone else. He lost heavily to Ronald Reagan in 1984 in the presidential election. And he died in Minneapolis on Monday at age 93. So a former vice president of the United States, Walter Mondale, who died. I think he'll probably be remembered more for losing to Ronald Reagan than he will be for having been the vice president under Jimmy Carter. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden and Jill Biden, the First Lady, said in a statement that they were able to call on one of our nation's most dedicated patriots and public servants and call him a dear friend and a mentor. So there he is. Yes, Mr.
Well, the two of them clearly had great genes. He and former President Jimmy Carter, because he's still alive.
Jimmy Carter's still going strong, right?
I nearly said alive and kicking, but I don't know if he's really kicking. But he's alive.
You know the app Clubhouse, and I downloaded it when it came out, and I thought, "Ooh, this will be interesting." But I must be honest with you, I found it very annoying because the notifications pop up on my screen, and then I sometimes click on them by mistake. And then I end up in a room with all these people talking to each other, and it's terrible.
Why don't you just turn off the notifications?
Well, I'm going to, but I also think I'll just uninstall the app. I mean, I don't see a use for us doing it currently. What we're doing now is pretty much, what Clubhouse does in our own format. But Facebook is apparently announcing that it will roll out a series of audio features in the next few months, because one thing you can't do on Facebook is audio. You can post pictures, you can post video, you can post text, you can have polls, all that kind of thing, but you can't do audio. And now they're going to roll out live audio rooms, which is almost like the popular Clubhouse app that allows people to listen and participate in live conversations. I mean, this is what Facebook and Instagram do, right? Mark Zuckerberg's companies. They see what other apps are doing. Clubhouse does audio rooms. Snapchat did all those filters and stories. They stole those for Instagram. So they're just a parasitic company, these guys at Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram. They just steal other people's ideas and put them in. That's all
But
they
they're
do.
right. Like, why
Well, yeah,
reinvent the wheel? Just adapt the wheel for snow, adapt it for gravel. That's what they're doing. They're
But
making the wheel better.
let's not pretend any of these people are original thinkers. They take the good ideas and they put them on their platforms. And because they've got huge numbers of people, they end up being bigger than the original idea, which is great. So go ahead. But let's not pretend that Mark Zuckerberg is a genius. He's just basically copy and pasting everyone else's ideas. So let's see. Facebook
Like, at the end of the day, good ideas are done. Like, there's nothing new to invent. Everyone's just taking something else and improving it.
I don't have a problem with it, but don't think that Mark Zuckerberg is a genius. He just lucked out, and now he just steals all the good ideas while other people are slaving to make them happen. I don't mind, though. I'll tell you why. Because now Facebook will allow users to listen to podcasts directly from the Facebook app. So you could listen. So you could listen to us on Facebook, and I'm happy with that. So go ahead, Mark. Whatever you want to do.
I cannot remember the last time I listened to like radio in a car, or like I don't even know how to listen to radio out the car, but I cannot remember.
So I've been driving one of Phil Kutz's cars from DeWitt Motors, right, for the last while. In fact, I've been driving different cars of his for a couple of months now, since probably about June of last year. And every one of them, luckily, has had Bluetooth. And my phone just connects automatically to that. And whatever, if it isn't a podcast playing, then it goes to my music app on my phone. So I do not know what's going on radio. I have no idea. I haven't listened to any of it. The only time I ever hear about it is when like CS sends me a story in the news about like lineup changes at some station. But I honestly don't listen to radio anymore. It would be to me almost like stepping back in time. It feels weird.
It's like, I don't like the element of like, it's so controlled there that like they told what to say and what they can't say. And like this sort of show is just like unscripted. You just go with what your heart wants to say, and your mouth just puts it together.
Just by the way, Carl seems to be confused between two different apps, House Party and Clubhouse. Now, House Party was an app that launched at the beginning of a lockdown last year, remember?
Well, yeah, we used it a lot then.
And people used it for like 2 or 3 weeks. They used House Party. And Clubhouse is different. Clubhouse is it's almost like you've got rooms where people are having like mini conferences. It's almost like open public Zoom meetings, but mostly only audio.
But then someone has to send you a link, right, for you to join.
I think you can recommend it to people, and you can invite them to your room and all that stuff. But I don't know. I mean, it's to me it's annoying because it just pops up on my screen, and then I end up having to see what all these. And some people are really into it. Hey, like I see some of my friends are doing it every single day. But I have yet to be persuaded to join it. Maybe I'm just being slow on the uptake on this one, but not really.
I also think I'm just going to skip this fad out because it doesn't appeal to me. Even the idea of people think of it in a real life scenario. There are 5 people standing around in a circle having a conversation. Then you now walk in and you just stand amongst them. It's like if you weren't invited, then what are you doing in it? They're already talking. So I don't know, it seems a little weird to me. And the fact that it's just weird.
Maybe not the target market.
Maybe
it's like a younger generation that just wants to talk celebrity gossip in a room for hours. And you can drop in at any time.
A younger generation.
Yeah, the moment you two stop being the younger generation, then I'm way past my prime. All right, so just quickly, this is an interesting discussion. I see Tatler magazine has published this story. More people watched Prince Philip's funeral this weekend than Harry and Meghan's wedding.
Oh, hectic.
Oh.
How's that, huh?
Their wedding?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The event was watched by 13.6 million viewers. That's just in the UK. Coverage of the funeral was spread across 3 TV channels, with the BBC coming up top trumps with 11 million viewers, followed by ITV, and that was 2.1 million. A further 450,000 followed on Sky. You see, people often forget because Sky News is available on South African DSTV, and a lot of people like Sky News, but Sky News is a distant third to ITV and BBC. Anyway, apparently the ratings for this, in terms of people watching, were much, much higher than the wedding of Harry and Meghan. How's that? The Duchess of Sussex and the Duke of Sussex's wedding saw only 13.1 million viewers. So it's not a huge difference, but it's a couple of 100,000, like 500,000 or 600,000 people in the UK who watched Prince Philip's funeral that didn't watch Harry and Meghan's wedding.
Oh, this is in the UK. Okay. But it's quite telling if it's, the support within the UK. Did you guys watch the wedding?
The wedding? No, I didn't even watch the funeral.
I watched the wedding, but then I had to record the funeral because I was at a wedding. so that was my plan. But they're not counting us anyway, so they're counting just the UK.
Right.
It's so crazy how it's their law that these things have to be filmed and in the public eye, and that I can understand why. Was it Harry or William that left the monarchy? Harry. I can understand why he left. He wants to live a private life, and everything's exposed when you're in the royal family.
Yeah, Flax, if you want to live a private life, you don't go on Oprah Winfrey's show and do an interview.
Okay,
that's
true. He dropped the ball there.
Right. So Andre says, I only watched the funeral because I wanted to see the customized hearse, which I want to copy for my dog when he dies.
That's cute. I think it was that Land Rover.
Yeah. Anyway,
I thought I didn't know it was customized. I literally thought they had that Land Rover for all the funerals, and I was like, "That's pretty cool."
No, he apparently Prince Philip had a hand in designing it.
How much budget would you guys put behind your funeral?
Budget? I really don't care because I won't be here anymore. I know that some people like to make a big fuss when they go, but it's up to the people who are left behind. And if they don't want to make a fuss about me, put me in a cardboard coffin and just drop me in the ground. I don't care. I don't care.
No.
I promise you. I mean, if I've done great things by the time I die, if I've really achieved incredible stuff, sure, then go ahead, give me some kind of fancy funeral. But if I haven't, if I'm where I am right now, just cardboard box in the ground, pour some soil on top of it, and just leave me alone.
Do you not want to pick your coffin? No. It's the last purchase you make.
No, I don't care what put me in a pine box or whatever's cheapest. I don't think it matters. I don't want a fancy coffin. What a waste of money. What a waste of wood. What a waste of
tombstone?
Yeah, but make it simple, man. I mean, they say that a grave only gets visited by maybe 2 generations after yours, and then people stop visiting that grave. So then it just becomes one of many old stones in an old graveyard.
But if it's an exciting grave, people will visit it, and it will be like a showstopper. Holograms.
Michael, what's an exciting grave? Yeah, what, spotlights, fireworks?
Have you not seen those graves where it's they show videos on it? There's a QR code you can scan to a Wikipedia page. Folks are reinventing graves. Yes, there's companies doing it right now. They let your legacy live on.
No, I don't care much about it. I really don't.
I want an audio box by my grave that someone pushes a button and I'm like, thank you so much for coming. Unfortunately, I cannot be here right now. Please leave a stone and I'll get back to you.
I love that. That's fantastic.
You got a voicemail message. You're in the afterlife. You're gone.
Audio message.
No,
you wanted to say Flex? People will
visit my grave. Just as you guys said that, imagine I said someone's got a grave like that in West Park. Trust me, the next person that goes to West Park is going to go there and push the button and have a little laugh with the guy. I'd love to make people laugh even when I'm dead.
So you also want strangers visiting you?
Yeah, like what's wrong with that?
What do
You're
you
making them laugh. Your legacy continues. Rather leave a legacy than leave money when you die, because no one goes to visit the richest man in the graveyard.
Yeah, that's true. Although there's some people who, people still go to certain places to go and like, who's the guy from The Doors? Jim, just gone blank. I know
Googler
everybody knows.
Schmoogler will tell us.
Yeah, just look up the Googler quickly. His name
Doors
Jim,
the movie or the club?
No, the rock band, The Doors. Jim Morrison. Jim Morrison.
Yes, Jim Morrison.
He's buried in the Père Lachaise cemetery in Paris, and he was a famous rock star. And he was kind of like, he died too soon in many people's opinion. People still go and visit his grave. So there are people who are like devotees long after you're gone. I don't really care. I don't care. I mean, I'm not gonna be here. What do I care?
I don't know. You want to be remembered in a certain way.
Not really. Let people have their own. I mean, right now, while you're alive, there are people who don't care if you're alive or dead, and there are people right now who love you or hate you, even if they haven't met you. So, what do you care about what other people think?
You got to focus on the ones that do care, and not waste your time on the ones that don't.
Well, then leave them some money.
Okay. But you're still adamant. Just get that cheap pine box.
One of my favorite sayings in the whole world is, what other people think of you is none of your business. It's still true.
Yeah.
Do you know another thing I'm going to add to my grave is sort of like a system whereby it's, how you have at gates, like it would be a button system. So every year I'm going to like create a sort of like a broadcast email that goes to my family and friends, where it will be a code, and you can actually come there and unlock a tiny little safe, and I'll give you money every year when you come visit my grave. And that's how you will get your cash. Not just going to give it in one lump sum.
People will steal the whole thing. They'll dig it up and take it away and then break it open, and then your grave's damaged as well.
What admin? And then, Michael, like, are people really going to visit you because they want to, or are they visiting you because
for money
they're being paid to?
Flax, forget about that. I want to ask you, if you got one, is that the what is that thing in the background there with the what did they call those again?
Who is it? This is a hoverboard. You know who gave it to me?
Who?
Casper de Vries. I had to go to his house one day and collect it, and it was like the most awkward thing ever.
I've got one of those, and I haven't been on it in ages. But I just saw it now in the background of your picture, and I was like, "Shit, man, that's cool." I forgot I even had one of those.
During lockdown, I was like riding this thing around the pool for hours.
It's so much fun.
Yeah, they need to make a comeback. Yeah.
Oh, I was asking, why was it awkward?
Well, basically, Casper came to me in the studio one day and was like, "Listen, Mike, I've got one of those Justin Bieber things, and I can't ride it." And I was like, "What Justin Bieber thing?" He's like, "The thing that goes woo." So I was like, "Cool, let me come check it out." For some reason, he couldn't send me a photo, so I had to travel all the way to Northcliffe, like, to check it out. And like, Casper's like, he's like the funniest Okalab. And now he's like giving me a tour of his house. Then his dogs are like jumping and humping me. And then he's like, "Don't you just want to ride out here?" It was just really weird.
But
he's a good oak.
He just gave it to
me. And he literally just gave it to me.
No, he's a nice guy.
I used to ride the same one I used to ride around studio.
I remember that. You brought it to the studio. I used to bring mine to the studio occasionally because we have that big room where everybody's sitting, and there's enough space to go all over the place there. And I mean, it was really irritating for people because when I was kind of obsessed with it and I'd learned to ride it properly, I would ride it around while we were having meetings. So people would be sitting taking notes, and I'd be riding around in that stupid thing, and it
a little distracting.
It drove everyone crazy, but I haven't used it in ages. In fact, maybe I should just give it to my nephews as a present. They'll love it.
Yeah, I think it's still the in thing. I remember going with you, Gareth, once to like the Dome or somewhere like that, where it was an award show for a private company, and we went to go meet with the event organizers, and you just rode that thing straight through.
Yeah, I took
you
it there.
Rode it?
Yeah. I once took it. I took it to Sun City once. I did an awards show there, and I was emceeing it. And I rode it around the whole of Sun City. So everywhere I needed to go, I had my own transport. Do you know how cool it is? Are you joking?
Yeah.
It was fantastic. And the battery lasted forever. So it was just terrific. I could drive it anywhere. It's awesome. It's like having your own.
It's
No, it's better than a golf cart. And you can put a little backpack on so you can carry all your stuff on your backpack. I think it was awesome. I think maybe now I'd look like a bit of an idiot doing it, but screw it. I'm going to try again. I'm going to go and dust it off and get it out of the garage.
I'd love to bring back Heelys. I feel like those are gone too soon. And they're a form of transport.
Do you know what those are, Gareth?
What are no, remind me.
You don't know what Heelys are? Imagine
it's
a
our
shoe.
Generation, Michael.
Oh yes, sorry, I do know. Yeah, those things with the wheel in the back heel. Yeah.
Those were cool.
Yes.
You fall a lot, hey?
They had to ban those in shopping centers because actually just getting like around much easier. I love them. The concepts there, the designs there, the ideas there.
Listen,
no, both of these concepts.
I hate to cut this short, guys, but we've been talking shit for so long. It's 7:03 already, and we've got to get to this. I know. No, time is running away. So Michael Flax is with us. Sia Sangweni. This is cliffcentral.com. It is a Tuesday morning. Let us know what's on your mind, 0797482090, or just comment on YouTube. And remember, while we're talking about YouTube, to like and subscribe if you haven't already done that, and tell your friends so you can bring all of them here and they can discover the joys of a live show that actually has interesting things to get into rather than just bullshit about the sport, news, traffic, and time.
This week on Auto Central.
First question comes from Lizols, who's asking, trade a finance car with a cosigner. So is it possible to trade in while you have, debts essentially? Also, can my husband be a cosigner as he has better credit and a better salary?
Blind History is back for its 5th season. The award-winning podcast takes a look at some of the most enduring heroes, greatest statesmen, most reprehensible villains, and despicable tyrants of history. Join me, Gareth Cliff, and my co-host Anthony Mederer for the new series of Blind History. It's available on cliffcentral.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. cliffcentral.com on a Tuesday morning. We've got Michael Flax with us today. and Sia Sangweni, and we've got lots of good stuff coming up for you. In fact, Pepe Marais is going to be joining us in a short while. He's the founding partner of Joe Public United, and he's an incredibly successful man, all in his own right. But he's also written a new book, which is called Growing Greatness, A Journey Towards Personal and Business Mastery. So if that's the kind of subject matter that you're interested in, you're in for a treat today. His previous book, that was his previous book. His new book is called 20 Habits That Break Habits. And we're going to talk to him about that. So I'm excited to speak to Pepe. He'll be joining us just in a short while. Those fires in Cape Town, man, that seems to be something everybody's talking about. I have friends in Cape Town, and they actually decided, because they've got young kids, that they were going to evacuate and go somewhere else. So they got in the car yesterday, locked up the house, and drove out somewhere else. They're going to stay in a hotel because the kids are coughing. And I'm telling you that those fires have created such a problem, and obviously there's been huge destruction. As far as I know, up to now, no one's died, but that might have changed, because a lot of people with, respiratory difficulties might have already succumbed. There might be people who've been fighting the fires, and we know how brave firefighters are putting their lives at risk in order to control the fires. They could also be in great danger. But if you know anybody who's in Cape Town at the moment, it might be worth just checking in on them, making sure they're okay. It's very scary. See how quickly that fire spreads.
It's been beautiful to see how people are getting together, and companies are making it easily and more accessible to help. A very caring person was sharing with me all the companies that are helping. Even the Kifness has a genius idea. We're heading towards winter. They've come out with a onesie where they're selling, and proceeds go to help people that have been affected. Radisson Blue Hotels giving discounted rates. SPCA is helping. I love it when companies come together and they're lower their guard, and it's no longer about money, and it's about helping people. And that's the world I want to live in, where people want to help people, not for monetary gain.
Look, I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was this bad. When you get numbers, it provides you more context to things. There are an estimated 4,000 UCT students alone that have had to be evacuated and moved out of their race because of this. 4,000 people. That's just UCT. That doesn't count the families and people who are around there. This is a lot.
I've seen these horrible pictures of what the UCT library looks like now. Very, very sad. I mean, just the most awful thing to see the inside of that building just gutted. And you think about all those books, and UCT's it's an old institution, a venerable old institution full of really interesting and unique documents that have, many of them may have gone. I mean, I was talking to someone yesterday. Apparently they have strong rooms there, and some of those strong rooms, some of those fireproof rooms may have saved the very, very, very special and important and collectible things. But a lot of it's just gone up in smoke. And, it's scary when a fire gets into a residential area. And we've spoken about this. In fact, we were talking about Cape Town fires 3 or 4 weeks ago in the news, when we said that the Western Cape provincial government is getting ready to deal with the way fires spread in the Cape, especially in informal settlements, where it just jumps from one place to the next. And if it gets into residential areas, man, because Cape Town's quite densely packed, there aren't a lot of open spaces outside of the actual nature reserve and the mountain itself. If it gets into a suburb, and especially where there are flats or there are buildings that are super close together, obviously informal settlements, which we've mentioned, then it just gets really bad really quickly. So, I'm just thinking of the people in Cape Town today, and I suppose we all are.
I was looking at the photos and the fire trucks and how they were treating the fires. And I disagree with our current methods of treating fires. A hose pipe with water and a couple fire trucks is just not enough. I think we need a new method to sort of drain out the oxygen. And the army should have been called in straight away. We should have every single available water source just to deplete this fire in an hour.
Yeah, but
it should not be spreading.
That's easier said than done, hey? I mean,
It needs to be done and said.
No,
yeah.
well,
Look, they're
especially in
doing
a country
everything.
like ours.
They're doing everything they can. I mean, they're dumping water on it from helicopters. They've got the fire engines deployed to wherever they can. But there's only so much infrastructure that you have ready to go in order to deal with a fire like this. So I think they're doing the best they can. I don't
They
think that
take
I don't think anyone's sitting there, um, just hoping something will happen. I don't think that the government are just sitting there doing nothing.
I just feel like, so I watched a video where a helicopter went and dropped a little bucket in a school pool and then went to the fire. And I'm just thinking, like, surely we can invent something that like depletes the fire faster than a bucket and water. Like, surely there's a substance that drains out the oxygen from fires. Or like, imagine, this is an idea. Imagine a big box.
It'll also kill everything in the area if you drain the oxygen away. All the animals and people
Good
in that area
point.
will suffer and die. So you got to be careful. Also, Flax, you can't do more than they're doing. I mean, a fire spreads, and when the wind picks up, then what it does is it actually fans the flames, and it makes the fire bigger, and it spreads it faster because it actually pushes it along. That's the danger. And for the last 2 days, they've had quite a lot of wind.
I'm interested, as you know, we find out more details here about the origin of the fire and what had happened there. I'm not being naive, but I really don't want to think that someone had the sole intention of purposefully, getting all of this or making all of this damage. They have one suspect that they're currently looking at, who they think started a fire, and left it there.
If it does turn out that this is arson, and it's amazing how these forensic scientists can actually find out where the fire started, because they're able to trace back to precisely where it all began. And if they can find people, I think they must prosecute these people to the full extent of the law. Because if you set fire to things and you think that you won't be caught, and it ends up causing all of this damage, it's just devastating. Someone's got to pay the price, right? And if you can actually find out if someone did it maliciously, like a lot of these people will admit to it. Apparently, this guy who they've arrested actually admitted to starting a fire. And I think we all deserve to know who that person is, frankly.
Do we not have satellites that like film everything, that we could just like go back a couple days and just get the video
Big Brother's
footage?
not watching.
Yeah, I mean there are satellites that are observing things, but Flax, you never know where they are at any given time. Usually they're focused on one particular area, and they don't, satellites don't stay still. So you have to keep changing satellites, and you need a huge amount of money to do that. Plus they're not filming in HD. They can't like pick up facial features from space. So there are some that can, but we don't have any of those. And I promise you that there's no one in South Africa who has the kind of money to have that sort of satellite tracking constantly, that kind of satellite observation available 24/7. No one.
I guess.
Maybe the US military. That's about it.
We're all just throwing out suspicions here. But Gareth, what do you think? Do you think it's someone who had ill intention? Or do you think perhaps it might have been a homeless guy who was making a fire but was irresponsible enough to just leave it after it got warm?
I mean, I don't know. These things sometimes start off naturally. There could be a spark or there's a bolt of lightning, or it's rare, but it does happen where it's an act of God, so to speak. In this case, it is suspicious to me that it started at UCT, because we know that the universities are currently a locus of real malcontents. There are a whole lot of people who are complaining.
Locus of who?
Malcontents means malcontents are people who are unhappy, Sia. People who are So I think that there may be
word being milk.
MALCONTENT.
Why would you say malcontent instead of just not content?
Because it's one word rather than two. It's economy.
But everyone understands not content.
Well, if you take 5 seconds, you'll figure out malcontent. Anyway, the fact is that these people we know that there are a lot of unhappy students, right? And we know that there's a huge amount of tension on South Africa's university campuses. And I suspect that they may be linked, although that I don't have any evidence at the moment for that. It could also just be some really angry, antisocial misfit who, like these school shooters or anybody like that. And this person just felt like being destructive. If it turns out that that is the case, then that's very, very sad, because now currently Cape Town is experiencing the absolute worst. We're going to go to Pepe Marais just now, and I want to go to him a bit earlier than usual this morning because we've got Blind History coming up a bit later on, and I know there are lots of people who want to speak to Pepe, and we want to talk about his new book, which is called 20 Habits That Break Habits. And I love the book because, first of all, it's packaged to almost look like a box of cigarettes, which I love, since we're talking about habits. So here he is, Pepe Marais. How are you, Pepe? Nice to see you, man. No, you're on mute.
Just on mute.
I said, let me unmute. A daily mistake. Good morning, Gareth.
Yeah,
nice
absolutely.
to see you.
How are you?
Very good. Very good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's good to see you. I'm sorry it's taken us so long to actually get you on the show, because I received your book, it's last year already. And I just, first of all, the idea of packaging it like that was just so clever. So congratulations.
Awesome.
How's the book doing?
This one is doing a bit slower than the first one. The first one actually surprised me. But this one's a bit slow, but I think it's also the state of the world, I know sales and exclusives down by like 40%, so it's impacting it. But I mean, I'm not in it to sell, to make money out of it. So whoever reads it, that's good enough for me.
No, I'm afraid that none of us are going to be like J.K. Rowling rich out of our books, right?
True story.
It is astonishing, just to give people the background, that Pepe Marais has been able to raise the bar not only at Joe Public United, which is an incredible agency, but also serve people, inspire, and assist everybody towards being the best version of themselves through his books. If you haven't done it yet, you've got to check out his first book, which is called Growing Greatness, A Journey Towards Personal and Business Mastery. And he's just brought out this new one. So tell me about this book and why you decided to do a second one.
So the first one, Gareth, I'm very purpose-driven in my life. I mean, it was quite a change from what I used to, the life I used to live to the life I live now. It's a huge change for me in 2007. So the first book was almost, I know entrepreneurs are needed in this country. So the first book was in service of entrepreneurs and sharing my business journey with my partners to show that, it's overnight success doesn't exist. It's really... Yeah. It's not a truth, and there's a famous saying that says it takes 17 years to become an overnight success. So it's a long journey, and I wanted to share that journey. And then I also wanted to plant the seed of the power of purpose within a business, which is something that we put at the core of Joe Public back in 2010. Mm-hmm. So that was the reason for the first book. And then the second book was just an idea I had to do the social experiment, because I'm an ex-smoker. I smoked for 18 years. Yeah. So I just had this very strange idea, and then in the end, I didn't know COVID was coming, and I had to write this book in lockdown amidst a lot of other things. So it was just an idea.
Well, I think it's a great idea, and it clearly is. In order to write a book, you really have something. You have to have something to say. You have to feel like there's a contribution you can make here, and I think it's great because, let me tell you, writing a book, and I've experienced this having written two. It's not easy. You have to commit to writing. You're used to talking, and you're used to running a business, and all of that stuff is good and well, but you're actually judged there by the numbers and by the results. When you write a book, people can quote you 100 years after you're dead in your book, and you have to think very carefully about what you commit to paper there, because you will be held to account for everything that you write down. It's a lot more. It's a lot more complex writing a book than anything else. So let's just talk about purpose, because I've believed for the longest time that this is one of those things that is missing for so many people, particularly young people. They realize that there is more to life than, being popular on social media or having money or getting your rocks off, whether that's just having fun, experiencing the euphoria and the highs of life, and being a hedonist. There is more to life than that. And purpose is very difficult to define because it's so different for everybody. What is your definition of that? And how do you think you can help explain to people who are feeling that emptiness that a lack of purpose gives you,
Yeah.
what they should do to fix that, how you can rectify it?
So, I think I did a very deep transformational workshop because our business went pretty much bankrupt more than a decade ago with that 2009 recession. And I went through really I'm a very positive person. I went through quite a little bit of a dark valley. And I started questioning life. So I discovered a very deep transformational workshop that I did. But I think why it resonated with me is because I'm very strategic. And in business, or particularly in advertising and branding, marketing, we deal with strategy for brands. And brands all have these 3 to 5 year plans. And I started realizing I don't have a 3 to 5 year plan for my life. I'm just living weekend to weekend. And that was the beginning of my journey. So to me, purpose is actually strategy for your life. If I speak on a personal level, then for me, purpose is strategy for my life. So I'm I'm crystal clear on what my strategy is and what my approach is in all my endeavors, whether it's as a husband, a father, a business leader, a creative person, and I found that everything actually then started following that strategy, which just means I had a plan. And actually, in all honesty, the second book is also based on my strategy.
No, what is, I mean, like when you talk about a plan or a strategy for life, for many people, that sounds like the kind of thing you hear in corporates. They talk about this stuff, but I need to know, because you're a practical guy too. Does this mean writing down all the things you want, all the things you don't want, who you want to be working with, what kinds of personal goals you want to achieve? How does a plan like that become something practical for you to work on?
This is great. Okay, great. So I'd say the first step is to understand the power of one word. In the world, there's 42,000 listed entities across the globe on all the stock exchanges. And then who knows how many thousands of extra sort of non-listed entities. I can only find 3 where there's clarity on the one word that brand stands for. So purpose to me is defining one word that you stand for on a personal level as a person. It's almost your ultimate one word value is the starting point. Now, whether that is love or care or freedom or greatness, or it could be any word of value, but each person in my experience have a deep unconscious word. It's almost like your personal name, like Gareth. Gareth is your human name, and my hypothesis, and it's through my experience, it's not factual based, but it's through experience. I've learned that each person has an unconscious word that is the most valuable word in your life. And once you uncover that word, you need to work out what that word means, because in the absence of working out what that word means, you will not have a defined purpose. So I'll give you an example. Joe Public, the purpose word of our business is growth. Now, anyone would go at face value, well, that's obvious. The business wants to grow. But when we took the time to define the word growth, it means to be the fertile soil that grows our people, our clients, and our country. So now suddenly we've got a concept to build a business on. Fertile soil doesn't mean just any soil. So if we grow people that don't just grow like this, we grow them exponentially to the best of our ability. So we've got people, we've got clients, and we know if we want to play a role in growing them, our product has to be superior. That's the only service we can give to them in the wheel of marketing. And then country growth is our contribution through job creation, our taxes, and also our endeavors in township schools, which we support. So all those secondary goals that we set our business are all derived from growth to be the fertile soil that grows our people, clients, and country. So for me, it starts with one word. Define that word that you stand for. And that's
hard. That's not an easy thing to do. Do you have a personal word as well that's not Joe Public, that's Pepe Marais?
Yeah, no, I do. So my personal word is greatness. And at face value, it seems like it's the most important word in the world, and it's not. It's just a word. But what it means is to bring out the best in those around me. So that's my endeavor. So you can see how
All
the
right.
books
Before we
fit into that.
carry on, sorry to interrupt you, Pepe, but you said once you've got your word, but for many of us that's really hard. That's difficult to do, because there's so many words that we would use to describe ourselves. There's so many things that we think of when we think of ourselves. Most people's identities and purpose is complex. So to narrow it down, is there a process that you could go through? Like anybody who's listening to us now, is there a formula you can apply in order to narrow down 10 words that, say, people would write down about themselves and make it just one?
You see, the sad, unfortunate truth is the place that I used, which was called the center of light. And that was just, I've got growth mindset, so I throw myself at any crazy experience. They actually, through the COVID-19, in the process of closing down. But I think that's the way. Now when people are really starting to ask these questions, because off my first book, a lot of people went through that same experience, because it is such a deep unconscious journey to find that one word. And you're right, we are complex. How do you distill it down to one word? But I think just to be conscious of the potential that there is a word as powerful as your word given to you by your parents, that's in your unconscious, and just to start searching for it could be an interesting process. But I know fundamentally that it's true that each of us have a very unique word to us, to our identities unconsciously. That I know for a fact.
All right, I love that, and I think for many of us, this means that we're going to have to go off today and start coming up with precisely what that one word is, and maybe for some of us harder than others, but that'll help you. And then from there, you build it out. So now that you've decided that that's your word and you've defined it properly, and you figured out how you're going to make that word into the thing that describes your life for the next 3 to 5 years, for a lot of people, life gets in the way, right? They forget that, I mean, this is easier said than done, but if you apply this thing properly, it should affect and improve all areas of your life. But for many people, they're just trying to survive, and they've got bills to pay, and they've got daily responsibilities and all of that stuff. And it can be distracting, Pepe. It's almost like, if you're in survival mode and you're worried about the next meal, it's very hard to think about your word because your stomach is gnawing at you. So how do we get past that, especially in a country where we've got so many people who are unemployed, so many people who are in poverty, so many people who are in broken homes and who are abused and haven't got much to build a future on? What do you say to them? Because it sounds theoretical to those people.
Look, I have to say, the journey of discovering a purpose, and I mean, it's a very privileged journey. I have to agree with you there. I mean, I'm way beyond just survival mode. But what I can say is when I went on the journey, I was in survival mode. I had nothing, but not close to the nothing that the majority of our country have, But at least I have some context that it was not at that stage. There was a huge insight that all my endeavors did not result in financial benefit. But when I applied that focus to my life, the money came naturally and in abundance. Almost, I can't describe it, because my output did not improve. It was my intention that changed. So I still think that even if you come from absolutely nothing, like I would love to bring this methodology into the educational system of South Africa, because I think you can plant it into the consciousness of children and start at that age to find your focus of your life. And it's not your job, and it's not your career and your craft and that passion. It is something that makes that passion even more worthwhile. I would love to bring it in at that level. So that's part of my long-term body plan.
I just love that line that you used now. Your output didn't change, your intention did. That's a massive mind shift. And anyone can do that, right, Pepe? You don't have to be a university-educated philosophy student to figure out how to do that. No. You can do it in small things, then you can do it in big things too.
Absolutely. It's actually about responsibility, because it's very easy for me to blame the fact that my father was a drunken lunatic that almost shot us. He almost killed us at the age of when I was 3. Wow. I can easily use that and and blame that for my way I behave today, or I can take responsibility for that and learn from it and become better through it. So that's why I think it's a shift in intention, not necessarily what you do. It's why you do what you do.
I'm going to let Flax and Sia come in just now with some questions, but I've got one more for you while we're talking about philosophy. I notice in your book that you do talk about the Aristotle, his insights, because Aristotle was this great Greek philosopher who learned from Socrates and Plato, and was also Alexander the Great's teacher. And some of the stuff that he said all those years ago, is what, 2,300 odd years ago, that stuff's still valuable now. How much of that did you go into, and what kind of a scaffolding did it produce for you to figure out those habits?
Yeah, look, in truth, although I am studying, I'm studying towards a PhD at the moment. It's a hell of a journey.
What's a PhD in?
It's going to be in purpose. So I'm only finishing my MBA this year because I'm not uneducated. I've got a design diploma from an art school. So I had to do a PDPM to get into MBA. I'm doing my MBA to get into my PhD, but it's all to put, perceptually, to put more punch behind my assumptions around purpose. When I'm Dr. Pepe Marais speaking on purpose, because I've done a PhD in purpose for business, I'm going to be more believable. It's just the way we are, We believe
you
the guy with
think,
the podcast
you
with
would
money.
think that, yeah, but you would think that you'd had enough success for people to sit up and take notes. And I mean, you've already sold books, which is more than I can say for most doctors in the arts.
Yeah. Look, one can say that, but I had an experience once again where I actually, I told a fib because I could choose between Mr., Mrs., and Doctor at a big talk to entrepreneurs, and I just chose Doctor. And I saw the response. But maybe it's also my assumption, but that's what gave me the idea to get a doctorate, because I thought, it'll be a great journey to get more input. But to your question, I don't research. I only research now in my studies, but writing a book, I write on intuition and experience. But all this knowledge I know is not my cleverness. This has been around for thousands of years. We've just not been conscious enough to try and apply it as human beings, So I think COVID-19 is also shifting our way of being.
Flax and Sia, I'm going to bring you guys back in here because I know you both are interested in and follow what Pepe's up to. So, Flax, is there something on your mind that you want to ask? Have you read the book, or are you interested in reading the book, 20 Habits? Have you discovered any things that you can do to break bad habits and to bring good ones in?
So I haven't read the book yet. Definitely will read it. It's come up on my social media. Great advertising on the book, I must say. The concept of purpose, I find very interesting, because half of me believes I have a purpose, and the other half believes I'm wasting my time looking for my purpose, because my purpose is going to change on a day-to-day basis. And if I knew my purpose, and if I knew why God put me on this earth, would it really be that fun? So my sort of version like pivots around what am I good at, so that I can sort of focus on one thing. Because I agree when Elon Musk says, a lot of people say, don't put your eggs in one basket. Elon Musk says, put your eggs in one basket and watch the basket. So I believe you should focus on one thing that you're good at and harness that. So when I'm looking for my purpose and why I'm on this earth, as I'm 28 years old, and that literally confuses me. Like, why am I here? What am I doing? So I prefer not to chase my purpose or even look for my purpose, and rather just day to day deal with the cards that are dealt to me, if that makes sense.
You see, so I found my purpose at 38. And if you ask me, like, I take life as it comes because that's my journey. I never sort of question why things happen. I believe it all happens for a reason to take me to a certain place. But if I was as clear as I became at the age of 38, it would be profound how much further I would be now, knowing what I know now. So, and just to your point of fun, because that's always the worry. Ooh, this sounds very serious.
Yeah.
Let me tell you that my life pre-purpose, I might have outwardly looked like a fun guy. I was the life of all parties with my bells on my shoes and my long hair, and I played in bands. I did all this stuff. Inside, I was in turmoil. I was anxious. I had high levels of anxiety. I had social phobia. Once I discovered my purpose with that clarity, I became so calm inside. So my life is, honestly, you ask the people in my department, the creative people at Joe Public, we're having fun. In a high pressure environment, we are having a lot of fun. So purpose to me is at the heart of fun, because it takes away so much anxiety. So if I give you an example, to bring out the best in people, I can do that at home. I can do it at Joe Public. I can do it in my talks. I can do it in my books. It's just that direction. And then when I behave like a total arsehole, which I did the other day when I shouted at someone who drove me off the road because I had a bad morning, I was completely off purpose. So I'm not always on purpose, but at least I knew I was wrong. At least I could correct.
This is amazing, because you actually, I mean, the title of the book is 20 Habits That Break Habits. But actually the way you're talking now is almost like an addict who you're never completely not addicted. You have to work at this every day. And
Every
working
day.
at purpose, as I understand it from you, it's an ongoing task. It's not a battle. It's not necessarily something that's awful. It's actually something that can be tremendously fun and very rewarding, but it never stops. You never found your purpose, done. Now we can relax. Now everything's sorted.
Yeah. Gareth, in the book, I don't know if any of you guys have snow skied, okay, but I started with the green slope, and then I went up to blue and eventually red, and now I ski black slopes. And I tell you, black slopes are 1,000 times more fun than the green slope. They both get you from the top to the bottom of the mountain, but and I find most of us live our lives on the green slope because it's easier. The things that actually are tougher, they grow us, and they are more fun. They're scary as hell, but when you get through them, they're more fun. So when you ask me about fun, I can tell you my life, I have a very, very, very fun life. It does not always have to reflect on my face as big smiles, but my sense inside of fulfillment is insane. And I attribute that through the clarity of purpose, or to the clarity of purpose.
I just had an epiphany, and I don't think purpose is the destination anymore. I think purpose is the journey.
Purpose, spot on, man. Business books, business, MBA teach you that a business starts with a vision. They're confused in my book, because you start with a purpose. That is the journey, and the purpose will inspire a completely different vision. My vision used to be make X amount of million by 50, buy a yacht, sail the world. Now, what's the value on that? My vision's now to play a significant role in changing this country, which of course is like not a burden, but it's quite a task. But it excites me because it's like, okay, it makes me feel that I'm bringing more value in this lifetime, even if I don't achieve it. Because you're right, it's a journey, and purpose is a journey because it's where you come from as a human being.
I feel like people get mistaken. They feel like once they find their purpose, they can just go sit in the lazy river and they've already figured it out. And I don't think that is how it works.
No, not at all.
Pepe, you just hinted at one last thing, and we've got to wrap this up because we've got to get to blind history for this morning. But before you go, you said just a second ago that it may be quite a big ask for you to say you want to play a significant role in the future of this country. But do you think that many people, based on your green slopes versus black slopes comment, many people, they set the bar too low because they're afraid of failing? And especially in South Africa, we have this idea that humility in and of itself is a virtue. We need to be more ambitious for ourselves, and we need to be more ambitious for our country, because at the moment we're in survival mode, and there are too many people in South Africa who are really doing just enough to eke out an existence and just enough to get through the day. And those people who do take the risks, and those people who believe in themselves, and those people who aim high enough, it seems to me that the rewards come to them much more easily than even they would expect.
Yeah, that dovetails perfectly into that intention. And I think when you go into this world to truly serve others without wanting to get back, it is quite profound what you get back. That's why I'm saying it's a subtle shift. I was very self-serving before the age of 38. I was a good person. I wasn't a bad person, but I was self-serving. And when I just made that subtle change in service of others, I mean, I sometimes have to pinch myself the things I get to do. And I don't even think that I've personally, or my business, or our business, not my business, our business is a collective of people. We haven't even begun to add value, the value that we can. So it's a truly exciting journey. It really is. And when if anyone listens and it sort of resonates, then just go on that little search, figure it out. It makes life a bit more exciting. Otherwise it's just the same, mundane, every day, every week. Hey, it's Friday, and it's like Groundhog Day.
No, I agree with you, and I've felt like that a lot recently. So it's maybe time for me to set out that 3 to 5 year plan now, and get off my ass and actually do something useful. All right, thank you.
You do a hell of a lot, Gareth. Yeah, whatever.
The point is, if I said to you, "You've already done enough," you'd swear at me, because it's never enough. You need to have a reason to wake up in the morning and make a difference. So, Pepe, thank you, and well done for writing 20 Habits That Break Habits, and that's a great place to start. If you've heard anything that Pepe said this morning, and it's done for you what it seems to have done for Flax, and it's also hit a couple of nerves with me this morning, then pick up the book, and that's where you start. 20 Habits That Break Habits. Pepe Marais, thank you very much for joining us.
Really appreciate it. Much appreciated. Cheers.
Good to see you. Thanks, Pepe. What an interesting dude, huh? I mean, and so many things he said there are just ringing in my ears right now. I actually took some notes. I wrote down a whole bunch of notes. So
I feel like I'm going to live life a lot different now that I know purpose is the journey and not the destination.
Yeah, I think that was a smart thing to pick up there. All right, listen, we've got to move on to Blind History. It is time for us to introduce to you the subject for Blind History for this morning. We actually spoke about him with respect to the funeral of Prince Philip, which happened over the weekend, and he is King George III. So King George III was well known for a couple of things. He's well known for losing the United States of America as a colony, because during his reign they declared independence. He's also known for having the third longest reign in British history. The longest reign being the current Queen, the second longest being Queen Victoria, and the third longest being George III. And he was a really interesting guy. I mean, very, very clever. He did go mad towards the end of his reign, which also made him really interesting. He went completely mad. He was suffering from something called porphyria, but they believe there were also perhaps other kinds of mental illness which weren't diagnosed at the time that he suffered from. But he went bonkers, and you can hear all about him in the latest episode of Blind History. It's one of my favorites. He is a really fascinating guy, and I think you'll enjoy this. It's another one, our second episode in the 5th season of Blind History, brought to you by Taylor Blinds and Shutters. This is cliffcentral.com. The signs of the king's madness were there early on. He once asked his surgeon to get the Spanish to swap Gibraltar for Minorca. He would write to farmers and give them advice on breeding better pigs. He also thought he could control the weather with his mind. At the end of his life, King George III was completely mad. But during his reign, he was arguably a good deal smarter than any British royal, before or since. His book collection formed the basis of the British Library, and he was the patron of Handel's Hallelujah Chorus. He may have lost America, but King George III won over all of Britain. Blind History, Season 5, and a character that I've been looking forward to getting to for a long time. Anthony and I always talk about who we should have on the show in terms of these great historical figures. This guy kind of slides under the radar a little bit, but he was the longest lived and longest serving King of England. Before the Queen came along and before Victoria came along, he was the longest reigning monarch in British history. And his name is George III. Most people know only a few things about him. They know that he lost America, which is unfair. We'll get to that. They know that he went mad, which is also unfair. We'll get to that. And that he had 15 children, which was true. And we'll get to that as well. But what an interesting guy.
Incredible. I didn't really know that he was such an interesting person.
So George III was actually the grandson of George II. And they paid him no attention until his father, George III's father, died, and he became the next in line to the throne. And then suddenly George II took an interest in him, said to him at an early age of about 14 or 15, right, we're going to set you up in your own lavish apartments in St. James's Palace. And his first decision as heir apparent was to say, no, I don't want to do that. I'll continue to live with my mother, and I'll continue to have my family around me. As a young boy, he didn't want any of the money and the luxury of having his own household. And his mother was quite strict, as I understand it. He was quite strict on himself. And he had a number of tutors through his childhood who obviously infused a very strong sense of morality and of principle and of discipline in George III, because this guy grew up believing that certain things are right, that certain things are wrong, and you couldn't persuade him otherwise. He wasn't going to be bought over by the promise of pleasure or luxury. For the whole of his life, that one decision kind of set the tone for the way that he would live. And although his reign has been marked by, the colonies, America in particular, rebelling against him, there was so much that went on that was so good. Scientific development, the agricultural revolution, setting the scene for the Industrial Revolution, all of that took place under George III. He was the first English monarch of his dynasty, the Hanoverians, to speak English and to only live in England. He never left England.
And he loved that. He was English through and through. Yeah. And he said that in his coronation, I believe.
That's right.
I was born in England. I am English.
Yeah.
Where his grandfather and his father,
they only spoke German.
They were proper German. They could hardly speak English. And funny enough, his father, just on the side note, his father loved cricket, and he was quite good at cricket.
Yes.
And apparently that had maybe have something to do with his early death. And that's why he never came to the throne, although his father, being George III's grandfather, really didn't want him on the throne.
Well, the Hanoverians always hated their heirs. They used to say terrible things about, all the way down to Victoria. They hated their heirs. So the father always hated their son, and the feeling was mutual, going down every generation from George I all the way to Edward VII. And somehow, luckily, it broke at some point. But George III
But we don't know that, do we?
Well,
with Elizabeth and the crew.
maybe she still hates Charles. Who knows?
Yeah.
And they are still Hanoverians, whether they like it or not. So George was really interesting because he was very intelligent. He read prolifically. He wrote all the time. There is a collection of George III's letters in the Royal Archives in Windsor, which they actually did a documentary on about 5 or 6 years ago, which has just been released to the public. And it's incredible. Personal letters to his own family and his children and his friends, letters to politicians. He was very involved in the politics of the day. He knew everything that was going on. If there was an expedition to the Galapagos, he knew about it. If there was a new telescope being unveiled somewhere, he knew about it. He had astronomical clocks that had been given to him by, his admirers, and because he was patron of various science foundations. He supported the arts, Handel. He started the biggest collection of books in Britain.
And the Museum of the Arts, that was started by him.
Many different foundations and museums that supported all kinds of endeavors were started under George III. And he would arrange his day around eclipses and planetary alignments. And he had the most sophisticated scientific equipment that any monarch has had. He's probably the cleverest person to have sat on the throne of England. And I mean no disrespect to any of the
And a
recent
very, very
ones.
high work ethic. It's amazing what he got through.
Incredible.
And a lot was thrown at him. I mean, when he started, it was in the middle of the 7-Year War, which is basically what we would call the First World War of sorts, because there was where there were multiple countries involved, and he came into the middle of that.
Right.
And in all intents and purposes, I think he handled it very well. But then when they had to do the peace treaty, they felt that France should have been harder hit. But his whole point was that, if you do, they're going to come back harder. You know?
Well, it's interesting you bring up France because throughout his reign, there were a lot of comparisons with France, and France didn't make the better decisions. You know, if you look back at that time, the French Revolution happened during George III's reign. And if England hadn't been managed better and it wasn't a constitutional democracy, it might have gone the same way as France had. And France was a bloodbath for a long time. After that, Napoleon came along.
Yeah.
And most of Napoleon's real victories and his conquests were achieved under George III's reign, even though by then he'd gone crazy. And it was England who had to defeat Napoleon. It was England who everyone looked to because the rest of Europe was in disarray.
Yeah, so Wellington was part of under George III's era.
Yeah. Look, he went through a series of prime ministers. I mean, among them are famously William Pitt, George Fox. There were a lot of very interesting politicians. And Lord Bute.
Is
Don't
it not
call him
Butt?
Butt, but I know what
Sorry,
you mean.
yeah.
But he was alleged to be having an affair with George's mother. So
because they were very close, the family.
very close.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot that went on in this guy's reign because it was also such a long reign. And the interesting thing about him and his wife, Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, who also never really learned to speak English properly. I mean, she would ask for things in German. She didn't know how to speak English very well. And when she did speak English, it was with a very bad accent. And the children, some of them also end up speaking like this, yeah, because they were around their mother all the time. Like the daughters, the younger daughters were always around the mother and they were very coddled. The sons were maniacs. They were like real playboy princes. They had women and fast chariots and they spent money and they had seaside homes and, you know, they were really like the first European aristotrash. And George was horrified because he was a tremendously moral man. He never cheated on Charlotte once, which was extraordinary.
It was in that
considering,
era.
I mean, all of his ancestors were
Correct.
jumping from one woman's bed to another. All of his children were jumping, his sons anyway, were jumping from one bed to another. And there was George holding the fort.
Yeah. And he didn't even know his wife. So the first time he saw was at the time they were going to get married. He didn't know at all. I mean,
and he made a go of it.
And at 50 years, I think, or something
Look,
crazy.
unfortunately, towards the end, he was so deranged that he didn't even know she died. But he loved her to the end. And he, I think, was devoted to her in a way that we don't see often in, you know, the marriages of very important, very rich, very powerful, and very royal people.
Yeah, no, but often you don't think of in war's massively costly.
Yeah.
And the 7-year war is basically who was going to fall first, who was going to run out of money first. And France actually ran out of money, but England was struggling as well. I mean, didn't have much money. And I think that's really started to a certain extent the rot in their colonies, is that they wanted to up the taxes to get some money and to recoup money.
There's this conspiracy theory which was bandied about that the English were levying unfair taxes on the Americans, and it suited the Americans who wanted independence to say so. But George really had removed almost all their taxes by a certain point, and he kept the tea tax because he said otherwise they're going to think that we can't ever levy a tax again. So even though we've removed all of these, we'll keep that one. But they were looking for an excuse. Boston was the scene of it with the Boston Tea Party.
Yeah.
And George really didn't have anything to do with the ultimate loss of America. His own choice for prime minister, I think it was Lord North at the time, had lost pretty much all public support for a war. There'd been the defeats at Yorktown and various others that it just wasn't anymore something that he could keep holding on to. And George was quite removed from the decision-making with respect to America. He was a proper constitutional monarch.
But once they'd lost the colonies, he said, now I'm prepared to work with you.
Well, yeah, he met John Adams famously. And John Adams ended up being the second president of the United States later on. But he was emissary to Britain straight after independence. So you can imagine that first meeting with the king was very awkward. And George III is reputed to have said, I was the last to consent to the separation. But the separation having been made and having become inevitable, I have always said, as I say now, that I would be the first to meet the friendship of the United States as an independent power. So he was sensible.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, France went into the war, Louis XVI, before he had his head chopped off. He went in to assist the colony against England. But funny enough, not too long after that, because of the way George was, they became allies again, the American colony and England. So
Correct.
that turned against the French.
Now, slavery was a big issue during his lifetime, and he was pro-slavery. There are not a lot of people who'll be counted among the pro-slavers now, because it's not a very popular position to take. But at the time, he thought it was a good idea, but he didn't make abolition a cabinet measure. As a result, he kind of let his ministers decide in their individual capacity what they wanted to do. So he played this game of chess with Parliament the whole time, which is what a constitutional monarch should do if they're any good. He interfered some of the time, and he was often reprimanded for it by the public or by the politicians. And sometimes he forced his way, because he could constitutionally do that.
But the Parliament, wasn't it quite divided? There was a lot of...
So this is really the era where the Whigs and the Tories came to prominence, what eventually would become the left and the right of modern politics. And it's a fascinating story. I don't want to go too much into all the different prime ministers, because they could be episodes on their own. But what happened is that George IV, who was at that stage Prince of Wales, would ally with the Whigs just to upset his father. And his father would take it as a personal insult if the Whigs won an election and they supported the Prince of Wales. It was almost like you had two battling households going on here the whole time. And really, George IV was a bit of a disappointment to his father. You know, George III was working hard here to try and ensure that Britain was moving ahead scientifically, agriculturally, in terms of exploration, in terms of government, in terms of education, everything else. They were trying to make the country a real first world power for that time. And George IV was interested in drinking and partying and dressing up and decorating his houses.
And then, unfortunately, he had an episode, where this malady, which affected him a lot in his life, it happened, and Parliament needed to make a decision on what to do in case that George III would never come back.
Yeah.
And that's where they had to do something in terms of the law for the prince. And luckily
they instituted the regency.
The regency, correct.
But this whole story of George going mad, and there's lots of new evidence. They found a lock of his hair a while ago, and they tested it, and they found some arsenic in it, which means that he may have, not that he was poisoned, but he may have been exposed to poisonous wallpapers or whatever else. I mean, they say that's what killed Napoleon. But they've initially blamed the disease porphyria, which is a rare blood disease.
Which you get purple. Your
urine goes purple. And porphyria, whatever it was that drove him mad, he certainly was, slightly wacky. He used to say, what, at the end of every sentence. He would talk to animals all the time. He would talk to trees and address them as if they were other kings.
So that's not abnormal, is it?
Isn't it? He'd play games with his equerries where he'd ride on their backs like they were horses. This is when he was totally mad. Yeah. I mean, he was a good guy. I mean, he just loved going up to ordinary people in a straw hat and saying, "How do you do? What? I am the king. Who are you?" And then they'd talk to him. I mean, maybe that's where the current royals get it from. "Hello, what do you do?" And that kind of thing. But this is his social idea of being king, is that he would go around and talk to everybody. I mean, in private, he was probably a lot more serious, but he did go crazy. And I mean, he had a tough time physically. In those days, they didn't know how to deal with mental illness. So they would bleed you. They would put leeches on you.
And they did use arsenic in some form, actually,
absolutely,
to try and see if you could help.
And they'd beat him, and they'd put him in a straitjacket. I mean, can you imagine beating the king? Putting him in a straitjacket, and he'd be screaming because he didn't know what was going on. He was deranged. And he would do inappropriate things, like he'd pull down his pants and pee in the middle of a concert recital or whatever. So it became a bit of a problem. And he did dip in and out of this. I mean, in law, they call it a lucidum intervallum, where you come out and you're clear for a while, but then you go straight back into the madness. So it was a very sad thing to see. But he had been king for a very long time, and he'd been mostly a stable influence on things. And eventually, they decided after I think it was his third major episode, that it wasn't likely that he was going to come back.
Yeah.
But all the while, he had set up the English monarchy as an example of what he wanted a king and a queen and a royal family to be. And that example was inherited by all of his heirs and probably continues more or less to this day, which is why things like the abdication was such a scandal, why Charles and Diana's marriage breakdown was such a scandal, because the idea that George III put in play in the late 1700s remained a fruitful idea of what monarchy should be in the modern world, all the way up to the modern moment.
And even the ratification of the prime minister.
Yes.
I mean, that started with him.
Yeah, well, the whole relationship between the government and the monarchy was sort of put in place by maybe his predecessor, George II, but mostly him. And it remains that way. Sadly, for the last 7 or 8 years of his life, he was blind, he was deaf, he had long hair, a long beard.
But when he lost his sight, he would get people to read to him all the time. And so he was still trying very hard. I think that what pushed him over the edge was when his daughter died. And
his youngest daughter was Princess Amelia.
And they were close. They were very close.
He loved his children. I mean, he was fond of all of them. He grew to dislike the Prince of Wales, but the rest of them he absolutely loved. And of course, Queen Victoria's father, who was his 4th son, Edward, Duke of Kent, he died before George III, but he didn't even know what was going on by then. And when Amelia died a few years before that, it really hurt him. Yeah. He wrote letters to Charlotte. He was already kind of locked away and didn't see much of the family. I mean, he must have been quite a sad character. He was wandering around on the ground floor apartments, which they'd set aside for him. Probably
at Windsor. It was
probably padded the walls. Nobody went to visit him anymore. He was just a